Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica on our continuing series, the Unported playlist, where we take a look at some of my favorite arcade games never got ports home. And today we're taking a look at Galactic Storm, released in 1992 by Taito. It's a great space shooter. If you ever played Galaxy Force, you're definitely going to feel it right at home with this one. And I actually prefer this a little bit more than to Galaxy Force, and I'm not sure why that is. I've always loved Taito's design, their soundtracks, everything about their games always feels really good to me, and for me, and just in my opinion, I actually prefer this one a little bit more. And you'll see right when the game starts, we have some great sprite scaling effects on this one. I think they actually do slightly better of a job than Sega does because those sprites are huge and you really don't get too much pixelation with them. And the game is just fast-paced, intense action. There are tons of enemy sprites on screen at all times. The action never slows down or drops a frame, and there's always something going on. And that's how I kind of like these sort of shooters, even with like 2D shmups, horizontal or vertical. I like a really busy game versus a very strategic game, so something like this right here is just perfect for me. And you'll see as that ship goes over, there's a lot of depth in the design, and I think the designers and artists that made these sprites in the game did an excellent job producing it, because everything looks to the eye like there is a lot of 3D depth. Because some of those superscaler games, the sprite scaling technology in the GPUs, it looks good, but it has this weird compression to it, to me at least, where the background seems a little bit too close and it doesn't actually look like a fully 3D space. Where something like this really does emulate that full 3D design to a point where I believe it. And you'll see here that we're in between these two ships, and you can turn the camera around a complete 360. If you control your ship, you'll be able to rotate those, and everything's smooth. It's got a great visual flair to it, and there's just so little pixelation that it looks awesome. But I mean, this is a game, and we're a gaming channel, so I will say that this game has everything you want if you're into this genre. Difficulty-wise, it's pretty fair actually. I don't think I lost credit until the second stage, so I really felt like I was playing well. When you're trying to hit your enemies, aiming is really easy. You have a bomb attack if things get a little bit too hectic, but otherwise everything feels pretty fair, and I do appreciate that in an arcade game because they're so notorious for just being quarter munchers. And you'll see here I've taken a few hits, but it's not too bad if you learn to avoid things. And I will say with these sprite scaling games, avoidance can sometimes be hard because as it's coming closer to you, the projectiles, you may think that you're out of the way, but as they scale, you'll realize you're actually in the path. So there is some depth perception involved in making sure you don't get hit. And I do love this little screen transition with the warping space in the background just showing you going to the next area. And now that we're on to stage 5, you'll see that we're going into what looks like a gigantic satellite, and all of those sprites scale perfectly. And like I said, when you get close, there is some pixelation, but it's really not too bad. It looks to me very impressive, especially for 1992, because any of your home consoles, your home PCs, we're going to get anywhere near being able to scale sprites or show these type of visuals in a home console. Where in the arcades, that's why people went in the 90s, because the technology was just that much more impressive than what you could experience at home, and this game is definitely a really good instance of that being the case. And I do like how they mix up the different stages and backgrounds. First we're in space, going through these gigantic ships, and now we're in a forest level. It kind of has a Space Harrier vibe to it because you can go along the trees even though you're not running. But I do like the diversity in this game because now we have a giant, I'd like to call it a sandworm, but it's in the water, so that doesn't make any sense. Who knows what it is? But each area feels distinct. It has a new mechanic to it, a new visual flair. So you definitely don't feel like you're playing the same game over and over and over again. And that was right. It was the second stage I take my first death. So, I mean, if you pumped in a quarter or two in an arcade, you were playing for, I think with editing, 4 or 5 minutes until you had to put in more credits. So I think as far as an arcade game's concerned, that's really fair, and I do appreciate that with the game. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to let you watch a little bit of the gameplay and hear the soundtrack because Taito always does an amazing job with all their music. So we're going to go through this little area. I'll stop talking and I'll be back in just a second to finish up the video, but enjoy the music. And we have beaten the boss. And I do love how the entire screen just recedes into the background while spinning. And then you get this nice little transition again to the next stage. And I love this era of arcade games because obviously we got some scaling sprite effects on the Super Nintendo, but this was in 1992 and there were some Mode 7 in Super Nintendo games, but nothing like this because you can just see how many sprites is pushing around at once. And now we have to avoid things, and that's the next mechanic in this stage, is that striking any of the architecture is going to damage your ship, but you can fly above it, and there is some really nice ways to avoid things. Because in later stages, you're going to find that there's multiple paths you can choose. You can either go up or down, and that's something that I think is really nice as a mechanic to let you get a little bit more diversity in your gameplay. Because now we're, navigating through this asteroid field. We have to dodge the asteroids while hitting the enemies, and it just feels fun and fresh, and it doesn't really make you do things for too long. And that's sometimes my complaint with arcade games, especially shooters, is that I feel like by the midway point I've seen everything the game has to offer and I want to beat it for completion's sake, and I may still be having fun, but I'm kind of wishing that they would show a new mechanic or a new visual design, and this game definitely has all of that going on, because now we're under a ship and we can't go too high or else we'll strike it and take damage, so we're fighting these enemies inverted and just dealing with everything going on at once. And that's really fun to me, and that's why I love this game so much and included it on the playlist, because I feel like as far as these type of games are concerned, it has the most amount going for it that I really appreciate. Because right now, we're not shooting. Our job is just to get through the navigation. There may be an enemy here or there sometimes, but for the most part, you're trying to just make sure you don't hit anything. And you'll see I just stood there and I took damage. So you're definitely paying attention to more than one thing at a time. You're dealing with your enemies, you're dealing with your life meter, and you're just dealing with the basic navigation of getting around a stage. And it does get a little bit harder in later levels once you start going through corridors. There's maybe one or two instances that I'll mention later where I feel like my ship strike maybe wasn't fair, but it's the most mild complaint ever because a lot of these superscaler style games have that exact issue, so it's not really fair to critique Taito on this one because Sega had the same issues. It was just kind of part and parcel of dealing with these big sprite scaling games. And now we're moving on to the next stage. We're getting close to that planet and we need to get into the core to complete the game. And I would say that this game probably takes like 20 to 25 minutes to beat. If I looked at the entire capture, I think it was around like 24 or so, including getting some of the credits and everything for the video. But now you'll see we're going through this corridor. We have to avoid or try to shoot these gigantic lightning balls. And I didn't notice that first, and so I did take a hit. But it looks great. It does have that depth, and it's got an insane sense of speed to it. Everything feels like it's moving very fast, and this game does not drop a single frame. And you'll see here that I chose the upper path. We could have stayed low, and that's what I do love about the replayability of this. That it is an arcade game, it's not infinitely replayable, but you could play a second time and choose the alternate path that you didn't choose, and you're going to see something slightly different. So it's at least good for a couple playthroughs, and that's the thing about arcade games, is they're not console or PC games. You're not going to be able to play them infinitely unless it's like a fighting game where you just play competitively. A lot of these shooters are just kind of, I'll play it once or twice now and again, but I'm not going to play it once a week for a year. And that's just kind of arcade gaming and collecting in general, is that some of my favorite games are arcade games and I have them in my closet ready to play, but I might not hook them up all the time. And you'll see there I do take a death. No matter how hard I turned, I couldn't avoid that area, and you do get into a little bit of unfairness in that one spot. And you'll see now the game is pushing us down into this gully to make sure we go the right way. So it does dictate those things sometime. But that's the game. It's super fun, it's super challenging, while also feeling fair, and visually it just looks absolutely amazing. It's one of my favorite types of these superscaler games from this era. And now we have this gigantic spider in the background, and you'll see that the sprite is huge and it's not very pixelated. Everything just looks really incredible, so I can't recommend playing this enough. It emulates perfectly. You can get an arcade PCB for it. Granted, you are going to have to wire up some custom controls, but that really isn't too bad. I've done it with a lot of different games like this. I've got some tutorials on my channel. Not for this game in particular, but it's the same basic concept of any time that you're dealing with a game like this. But we hope you enjoyed the video. I really appreciate you guys watching. If you could do us a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and hit that notification bell. It takes a lot of time and energy to make each one of these videos, and we definitely appreciate your support. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. We definitely love answering them and not talking into a vacuum chamber. But short of that, we'll be back next Sunday with another Unported arcade game, and we'll be back on Friday and Sunday as well with more games. Thanks so much for watching. Bye bye.